It began, as such things often do, with smoke, thick, black and silent. On the morning of October 14th, the great house of Marlowe burned to the ground. By the time the fire brigade arrived, nothing remained but the charred skeleton of the west wing and a single brick chimney, pointing to the heavens like a warning finger. The blaze had devoured nearly everything, everything but a portrait. It hung in the drawing room, untouched by the fire, its colors vivid even in the ruin. The portrait of Eleanor Marlowe, painted a century ago by her husband, and said to be cursed. When I first saw it, the ashes were still warm. Inspector James Rathbone had called me in that morning. I was then a private investigator in London, weary of ordinary cases and longing for something more than misplaced jewelry or jealous husbands. "This one," he said, lighting his pipe, "has teeth. The case began with a death. Not from the fire itself, but discovered after it. The body of Henry Marlowe, the current master of the estate, found in the cellar, throat cut, eyes open, his hand clutching a half-burned photograph. The local papers cried suicide. Rathbone was not convinced. Neither was I. The Marlowe estate lay near the edge of Devonshire, a patch of moorland and fog that never quite let the sunlight in. When I arrived, the wind carried the faint odor of smoke and salt from the sea. The ruins rose before me, grand even in death, black beams tangled like ribs, shards of glass sparkling in the mud. A constable met me at the gate. "Terrible business," he muttered. "House caught at midnight. No sign of intruders. Family says he'd been strange of late." "Strange?" I asked. "Talking to himself," said the portrait was whispering. The surviving family gathered at the nearby inn. Lady Agatha Marlowe, Henry's widow, elegant, pale and cold as marble. A Victor, the son, 23, nervy, eyes like restless shadows. A Clara, the daughter, gentle, devout, and curiously silent. And Dr. Edmund Vale, a family physician and old friend of the deceased. They sat together like actors waiting for their cue, bound by silence. When I entered, Lady Agatha's gaze fixed on me. "You're not from the local police," she said. "No, ma'am," I replied. "Inspector Rathbone asked me to look into your husband's death." Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted her teacup. "My husband," she said, "was not murdered. He was taken. That night I visited what was left of the study. The smell of burnt wood clung to everything. In the corner, leaning against a cracked wall, stood the portrait. Eleanor Marlowe in her emerald gown, eyes alive, lips painted in a faint, knowing smile. It was absurd, and yet I felt watched. The fire had eaten the wallpaper, the furniture, the ceiling, but the canvas was immaculate, not a scorch mark upon it. When I reached to touch the frame, the air around it felt colder, as though the flames had spared it out of fear. Beneath the portrait, I found the remains of a journal, Henry Marlowe's handwriting, half-burned but legible. "She's awake again. I hear her in the night. The fire won't stop her, nothing will. If I die, look behind her eyes." I spent the next morning with Dr. Vale. He spoke like a man rehearsing disbelief. "Henry was troubled," he said. "For months. He claimed he saw Eleanor's reflection move when he did not. Once he woke the household screaming that she had spoken his name." "And you believed him mad?" "I believed him frightened." Vale hesitated. "There's something else. The portrait. It was commissioned by Henry's great-grandfather after Eleanor's death. She died young. Some say she leapt from the cliffs. Others say she was pushed." He leaned closer. "And each generation since has died within months of the portrait being restored or moved." That evening I returned to the inn. Victor Marlowe sat alone by the hearth, staring into the flames. He looked up when I entered. "You think it was suicide, don't you?" "I think," I said, "that your father's death has more witnesses than we realize." He gave a nervous laugh. "If you mean the painting, she's been part of this family longer than any of us. Maybe she finally got tired of watching." There was bitterness in his tone, but also something like fear. When I asked him where he'd been that night, he said only, "Not where I should have been." At dawn, Clara knocked on my door. She looked pale, her eyes red-rimmed. "Mr. Hart," she whispered. "I heard something last night, in the hall outside my room. Footsteps slow, dragging, and the smell of smoke. Did you see anyone?" She hesitated. "No one. But when I looked down the corridor, the portrait was there." "But the portrait is in the ruins." "I know." The next day brought rain, thin and relentless. Rathbone arrived from London, grim-faced, carrying new evidence. The results of the coroner's examination. "Not suicide," he said, laying out the report. "Marlowe's wound was made from behind. Clean, deliberate. Someone killed him, then set the fire to cover it." We confronted the family that afternoon. Lady Agatha received the news with silence. Victor swore. Clara wept. Dr. Vale merely sighed. "Then the question is, why?" Henry had no enemies, no debts, only his ghosts. "Ghosts don't carry knives," I said. "Some do," he murmured. That night, I returned to the ruins once more. Lightning flashed across the moor. The portrait hung exactly where I'd left it. I examined it closely by lantern light. There, along the lower edge, faint scratches on the frame, letters carved into the wood, M. Not initials of the painter, but of Eleanor Marlowe herself. Behind the canvas, something crinkled. I sliced it open carefully, and a folded parchment slid out. A letter, dated 1847. "My beloved Thomas." She knows. Agatha knows what we did. If she tells, all will be ruined. The fire must come. The handwriting was nearly identical to that of Henry's wife, Agatha. When I showed it to her the next morning, she went white as frost. "This is a forgery," she said quickly. "My husband, he liked to torment me, to pretend the curse was real." Rathbone eyed her coldly. "Madam, this letter predates your birth by nearly a century." She said nothing more. But that night Victor vanished. We found his car abandoned by the cliffs. A single set of footprints led to the edge and none returned. By now, even Rathbone began to waver. "This family," he said quietly, "has rotted from the inside for generations. There's something in that bloodline, something that doesn't wash away." Couldn't sleep. In my dreams, I saw Eleanor's face. Her painted eyes turning toward me, lips curving into a faint smile as whispers filled the air. When I woke, my lantern was still lit, and on the table another letter. No seal, no signature. Just 5 words. "She's waiting in the ashes." The first light, I returned to the ruins. The rain had stopped. Mist clung low to the ground. In the drawing room, the portrait was gone. Only a black outline remained where it had hung. Footprints, small, light, led from the ashes toward the cellar. I followed. There, among the wet stones, I found her. Clara Marlowe. She was kneeling before the portrait, which now lay against the wall. "I tried to stop her," she whispered, "but she said he deserved it, that they all did." "Who, Clara? Who said that?" Her voice broke. "My mother." We found Lady Agatha 2 miles away, driving toward the coast. Rathbone intercepted her at dawn. In the trunk of her car, a blood-stained knife and a small canister of paraffin. She confessed without struggle. Henry had discovered that his family's fortune was built on forgery. Eleanor's portrait was not merely a painting, but a cover for smuggled artifacts and coded letters passed through generations. When Henry threatened to expose the fraud, she silenced him, and burned the house to destroy the evidence. "I thought it would end with me," she said calmly. "But she wouldn't let me." "She?" Rathbone asked. "Eleanor," Agatha whispered. "She's still in there." Weeks passed. The ashes of Marlowe House cooled. The portrait was sent to London for study, but the gallery that received it burned to the ground the following week. No one could explain how. The painting was never recovered. I closed the case file and locked it away. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I still smell the faint scent of smoke. And when I pass the window, I see a flicker. A woman in an emerald gown watching, waiting.